you're the co-founder of two companies. One's based in Dubai. So let's talk about it. You started it less than a year ago, APM. Am I saying this right? APM?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So talk to me about it. What is it? And why did you choose Dubai to open it?
Yeah. So I think APM is effectively a software engineering company that helps people building in blockchain to develop from their absolutely just an idea to the MVP or then scaling up afterward. So it has a very much of a I think the background of all of this is we see so many founders in the blockchain industry are all trying to build something. But then trying to build something is hard, even with AI, even with vibe coding, right? Because to actually build a backend that would scale is not just something vibe coding would give you. So we see a lot of the founders are struggling to actually find people who would have the skills to build and also have the passion to build. Because there are many engineers, but not all of them are passionate about the field or the particular product. And I think where Dubai works really well for all of this is then Dubai has been very open to the blockchain industry. You see that VARA, which is the Virtual Assets Authority, was coming out with a lot of attempts in trying to see how to make Dubai to be the hub for digital assets. And that's why I think it makes a very natural home for APM in that case, because not just the capital, but also the a lot more people in the industry, in the blockchain industry, were moving to Dubai to try to find their foothold there as well.
Interesting. You know what I find interesting about blockchain is that if we just compared AI to blockchain, and I like to look at it this way. With blockchain, there was a lot of skepticism
Yep.
from various people, especially people who are well established, big corporations. It took a
Yeah.
long time. I mean, blockchain has been around
Yeah.
for a very long time, but
Yeah.
crypto itself, it all started with the whole, um, I mean, not the blockchain, but crypto with Bitcoin starting in the early 2010s. I think still to this day, there's a lot of skepticism. But if you compare that to AI, ChatGPT launched what, a couple of years ago? And now every single company in the world is trying to
Yeah.
become an AI company. So it's
Mm.
very interesting how, on the one hand, everyone immediately glorified AI, but on the other hand, blockchain, which is a tremendous technology, is still struggling
Yeah.
to gain its credibility. And you feel like what you're
Yeah.
building helps companies build something that can be trustworthy, scalable. Is that a bit the aim of what you're building?
Yeah. No, 100%. I think the reason why blockchain industry doesn't get that credibility is twofold. I think one side, blockchain is effectively a database, right? It's a database that if you are a participant to it, people can read and write out of it, and you can also participate in the consensus building or the consensus forming mechanism that verifies if a transaction, for example, has taken place. And the I think where it differs from AI is then in the blockchain space. Well, so I'll start with the AI space. ChatGPT, as you mentioned, is a great application, an application that people can see the immediate benefit for them. Like I'm writing a marketing copy, I'm writing a website, I'm writing an email to tell my boss that I want to quit, right? Like there are a lot of things that people can see immediate use of AI in that case. With blockchain, don't think that application is so apparent because it's
Mm.
ultimately a change of database at the back end. And most of the time, the apps that we use, we don't care what database is being used at the back end. I can't even name you the database I'm using on Notion, for example, right? Like no one's gonna think about it that way. And and so that is, I think, one part of it. The second part of it is the industry itself. The industry has become or has developed, I think, initially from a more anarchistic perspective that they want to do everything decentralized, everything on a blockchain. And to pursue that ideology means you make a lot of sacrifices in user experience, user interface. In even a few years ago, we're forcing everyone to use a wallet that has this long of a private key. And if you lose it, you lose all of the funds in it. And there's no way to recover it. And that kind of obstacles, I think, is coming from a very large chunk of belief that, well, we either go all in or not at all, right? You either go completely decentralized or you don't. And I think that's a very binary thinking that was very prevalent that actually slow down the application developments because it is very easy to then convince the 1,000, 10,000 people who truly believe in decentralization why they use blockchain with that kind of user interface and experience. But when we talk about the billions out there who don't understand why decentralization matters at all, those sacrifices felt very unnecessary. And so no one really using it. And without that user base, then a lot of the applications just keep building more and more towards those who already bought into blockchain. So it kind of became much of an echo chamber of people building for people who already believe in it, instead of actually going out there to look for how we can benefit people who don't give a damn about crypto or blockchain at all. So I think there is that gap in between that for us, we are trying to help not just building it, but also help push the founders we work with to think about why people who don't care about crypto would use this product at all. Like, how they find the same thing, in whatever they use today? Like, what exactly is the benefit? So I think that part is where we really try to hone in instead of just say, well, tell me what you want to build and then we'll code it up for you. Because I think more and more, so AI will also do that anyway.
Mm. Yeah, you said something super interesting because if we tie it back to the whole vibe coding situation that you mentioned, right now building an MVP is very easy. And it's easy and it looks nice, it looks great. You put a prompt and you have these tools that will give you a great website. It looks amazing. But the truth is, taking this MVP to production is not that simple, right? And
Yeah,
I think that kind of links what you were saying about blockchain, because blockchain is the backend technology, and people don't really know the complexity of backend. They don't really think about it. But when you compare these
yeah,
vibe coding tools and give you a nice website, they assume that, oh, that's it, it's done. But in order to optimize the backend using blockchain, I think it's amazing technology. But I also think that because of the terrible coverage it's had over the years. Every time I hear about crypto on the news, it's usually about a scam, it's about this and
yeah,
that. No one's really talking about the breakthrough in technology. I mean, the transparency, the value added, and it's very difficult to educate the market unless they want to learn more about something that they can't really see, like a front
yeah.
end. So I completely agree with you.
I think there is an interesting part of, and I don't think that the industry has a lot of driving towards that outcome. Being that, so I used to work in Animoca brands in post investment side, working with founders. And I saw a lot of founders who try to build an application with blockchain, but then it comes back to a lot of the advice that they were given, a lot of the guidance that they were given are also is around how do you create a token to incentivize early adopters and then launch the token so then they can be those early adopters get monetary incentives, right, to really come in and try it out first. And I think that inherently shift the focus of founders from how do I build a good product that people want to use naturally to how do I build an incentive system that gives people enough money to want to try this out. And in doing so, a lot of the products or a lot of the businesses in this industry sort of just appeal to those who would want that monetary incentive. And I mean, there are a lot of people who might see those appeal, but then ultimately those people don't stick. After they get what they call an airdrop, which is the tokens that you are given when you participate in or use a certain product. And then when it launched, you get certain amount of tokens, which then you can sell to monetize. And so once people get an airdrop, most of them just move on to the next product. And so I think there is a lot of that happening is because of how we have almost like educated founders who are new into this industry of how they should operate. but then those advice are not actually always the most helpful for the founders for the projects in the long run, which is why I think the ones who are still going ahead a lot of times would either have to say, I'm not listening to this advice because I'm a founder who wants to build a great product. I care about my users. Then I don't care about those who just want a monetary incentive to use my product. But those founders always have to fight an uphill battle when it comes to fundraising, when it comes to showing metrics and figures, because building that good product would take a little bit more time, right? Than say, let me just hand out cash so people would come use my products. So I feel like there is a lot of these dynamics at play. And the scam part, some people are genuinely trying to go out and scam people. And check out CoffeeZilla's YouTube channel. They have amazing coverage on that part. But there are also founders I've worked with that never wanted to launch a token, but they were told to do so by investors, by other founders, by influencers in the industry, well, to say, well, to attract users, you have to launch a token. Now the founder never wants to do it. He just wants to build a great product, right? But once you get into that token game, it just keeps going and going. And then you have to do listing, you have to find a market maker. And none of those things is actually enjoyable to the founder, for some of them at least. And so their heart is not really in it. And then there's little wonder why the token itself wouldn't do amazing, right? And from the people who went in just not for the product itself, but for the airdrop, for the monetary rewards, they felt like they are being robbed. They feel like, oh, wow, I thought your token is going to do so much better. And so once they see the token dip, they leave. And that is also another reason I think why there are also certain projects that don't mean to quote unquote, hurt their users, but end up doing the same thing because they simply were being asked to do something they never wanted to do at the first place by the industry. And it is very sad because for those founders, it could be 3-4 years of effort just went down the drain. And the punishing thing of it all is then in a token launch, if the token price flops, it's public. Everyone sees it. And then you have a lot of community just like being very upset about it. So you don't really often get a second chance. It's just you launch it, it fails, it's done. And it's not like you can say, well, yeah, the product feature doesn't work, let me fix it up. There's no fixing because the trust has been lost. And so I think there are definitely a lot of people who don't have a great experience in the crypto world. And I think there are a lot of them are more intentional, and there's still also a good bunch of them that could have been avoided in so to speak.
So, Joyce, I need to move on to the next company for the sake of
Yeah, let's do
time.
it.
So, talk to
Yeah.
me about MAASH. You're right now in Sri Lanka. And before we get into that, just explain
Yeah.
to me what is MAASH and why did you open a second company? And is it easy to manage both companies at the same time, especially since, well, they're not technically correlated? Maybe they are.
Right. So MAASH is, I would say in simple terms, MAASH moves money. So it is a money movement app. It gives you in crypto speak first, right? In crypto speak, it's a stable coin wallet with integrations that give you a virtual bank account and also a virtual card. So you can get paid through that bank account, maybe from the US, from the Europe. And then later on, once you receive it, then it would get stored on chain. And that money you can also use to spend with Uber, with ChatGPT through a Visa card. So that is what MAASH is in the crypto speak terms. Now, in the less crypto speak terms, I would reference Wise. Wise is a money transfer app that many people might have come across already. And what we are trying to do is quite similar. I think a slight difference is that we are definitely more targeting towards those in emerging markets where accessing US dollar is difficult. Because many countries, including Sri Lanka, you could technically open a US dollar bank account, but you cannot spend the US dollars. You have to first convert it into the local currency before you can spend it. And let's say if you want to buy, something in US dollars, there is a certain limit before that you can spend without having to go through additional approvals. So there is a lot of control in the country when it comes to spending and storing foreign currencies. So I think that is where MAASH is born, is that with all of the technical side aside, right? It's born from a wish to help people to worry less about money. It's for emerging markets, people and businesses to have to not think about how am I going to get paid? How am I going to make sure my savings or my company's money doesn't go down when the currency depreciates? And also, how do I make sure I can pay my people on time and also pay for my subscriptions, regardless of whether it's a US company or European or local company? So that's kind of where it is coming in from. The second question is why two companies and is it hard to manage? Um, it is two companies in the sense of a legal structure, but the people behind are similar. So we are effectively having APM to look into from a service model, pivoting more towards a product model. Because we see that the service model is getting more and more taken away, I think, through AI, because many of that vibe coding is definitely seeing the before MVP side of the equation doesn't make too much sense for you to look for someone else to help anymore. And then the second part is the service model is always constrained by manpower. And so we want to build something that scales better. And so we're now switching more towards the product side. It's still two companies, two legal structure, two different incorporation address, and even countries and continents. So it is definitely a little bit of challenge to manage that all together. I would say the fun part of it is to actually see for the same thing, let's say banking access, accounting service, or software, like you can always see the comparison of how things work in one country towards the versus the other. Just like how you are when you're working on your podcast, you can see how the culture, how things work differently in both North America and in Dubai.
Yeah, I what you're doing completely resonates with me because I I'm originally Lebanese, and it's a country that lost 90% of its local currency's value in about 18 months, which is beyond destructive. It's very difficult to explain how
Yeah,
the devaluation of your currency is the probably most chaotic thing you could see. We see sometimes in the US inflation's up 2, 3%, but imagine you wake up one day it's up 60%,
yeah.
70%. So I think what you're doing is great, and I think a lot of countries around the world struggle with that, especially those that are trying to service Western countries. They want to do it. They don't really have the means to get paid or use the money they're getting to save it, to do anything with it. The banking system is not developed enough. A lot of restrictions, like you said. But I'm wondering if people get paid in in your application, how can they actually spend it? Because here's where it's difficult for me. I get that you can spend it on the Ubers and ChatGPT subscription, but is the vision empowering local businesses to take that money as well, or is it just for foreign services?
Got it. So the with the Visa card, the users can spend it with the office online, but also in real life. So for example, if they are buying things from a grocery shop, as long as they accept Visa, you can use that money. So you can spend it with that card. So I think that's the first step. But then the second part of it is then a lot of the countries who have difficulty accessing US dollars today might also have difficulty for higher, digital cash adoption. So for physical cash, they're still part of life. It's not like you can just completely cut it out right away. So what we also have to do is to find ways for people to convert that digital dollar into the local currency for when they need the cash to spend, whether it's because that's how you give wedding gifts, or whether it's just for your everyday spend in the web market. So there is the second part of that which we're building out, and I think the tough part about that a lot of times is many of these type of service usually involves a very high margin because supply of US dollar is limited. And what we're trying to do is how could we use our platform to enable more people to do that almost a peer-to-peer manner. So then if I have a bit more US dollar than I need, this month, then yeah, if someone else needs the US dollar, just send me that local currency in bank transfer, and I will just pay them in app for the matching amounts. Maybe with like they can bake in a very small margin of 0.5%, for example. So there is those ways that we are looking at in how to help people actually get those money out of, not just for card spending, but say you can also put it back in the bank so you can pay for the rent as well. But on that payment point, I do think eventually, right, it is, and this is not today, because to go from point A to point B, you can't just teleport. You have to actually walk there, right? And I think this is what we are doing is we currently use Visa, we use different ways for people to convert that back to cash. So there is the path of walking towards point B. But what point B is then if we could get more people to simply accept those payments through, let's say, I want to buy a glass of water or a bottle of water, and then they can say, I'll just accept that in our app in MAASH. The reason that I would love people to do this is not so much because I really want them to use the app. I for sure do, not gonna lie. But the benefit is because every time you do a credit card transaction, us as individual users don't see it, but the merchant is actually eating around at least 3% of interchange cost. So that's why a lot of the merchants, if you say, hey, I can pay you in cash, they'll be happy. Sure, there are some people who do that for tax purpose. But there are also people who genuinely just don't want to pay 3% because that eats
Yeah.
into their margin. But they don't have a choice because now everyone is paying by card, at least in more mature markets, right? But that margin could really mean a lot if your profit margin is somewhere around less than 5%. Like we're talking about doubling their profit in that case. So if we could do that, I can see we actually help a lot of those companies with thinner margins, especially the smaller companies that don't have the scale to negotiate these fees down to survive. But again, this is not a step that we'll get to immediately. It would take a lot of time before we get there, but I do hope that we will get to that point B, because in that case, I'm hoping that more mom and pop store can run on their business for much longer than the pressure of profits that they're feeling today.
Mm. Yeah, that also makes a lot of sense because a lot of stores that I know around me, they don't take credit or debit cards. I forgot which one because it has a higher tax or like a
Yeah,
higher fee. So they will say below a certain amount, I'll not accept a card. So they will put a
yeah.
minimum of $5 or $10 before you can use a card, or else you're gonna have to pay cash. So I
Yeah.
get that completely. Joyce, we're way over time. It's just a fascinating conversation. I love what you're
Mm-hmm.
doing. I'm super bullish on you. I think
Thank
you really
you.
understand the industry in a corporate way, beyond the hype of blockchain and AI. I think you really understand how to get it out in the market. So thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it too. Thank you so much for having me.